Don't put Mr. Penguin right there. Take it down. Thank you. Because you're covering up the camera when you do that, too. Don't do that.
The penguin bigger.
Don't put Mr. Penguin up there.
I know it.
All right. Thank you very much. Top of the day, beautiful people. Top of the day. That's wabble. That's wabble. Happy Tuesday, y'all. So, bona, yeah. So, bona. All right, beautiful people. It is Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, Josiah. Shalom, shalom. It is Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021, day 103 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 772. That's without the Sabbath days and the feast days, Sabbath days added into the count. Bella, don't do that. Okay. Today, y'all, we are in Judges 16, 17, and 18.
Doing your video.
Don't do that. Don't touch it. Shalom, Auntie. Okay, let's pull this over here. Bring up the shimmer. All right, y'all. Let's go ahead and do the shimmer, which is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting at verse 3. Traina Betwabu. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahuwah, the God of our fathers, has promised us, in a land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, our God, He is one God, and you shall love Yahuwah your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the posts of your house and on your gates. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuwah our God for our good always, that He might preserve us alive, as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness. That's right. If we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah our God, as He has commanded us. We're rising, Shayla. We're rising. Shalom, shalom, Mom. Okay. So let's move this on around here.
Mom,
Yes, sir.
I didn't tell you.
What you need to tell me? Okay, y'all. Right on over here to Judges. Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? Okay. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and hop right on over to Judges. We are in Judges chapter 16. Let's get started. One day, Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. Word soon spread that Samson was there, so the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the town gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, when the light of morning comes, we'll kill him. But Samson stayed in bed only until midnight. Then he got up, took hold of the doors of the town gate, including the 2 posts, and lifted them up, bar and all. He put them on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill across from Hebron. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "Entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong, and how we can be overpowered and tied up securely, and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to tie you up securely." Samson replied, "If I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as anyone else." So the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. She had hidden some men in her room, in one of the inner rooms of her house, and she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it is burnt by a fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Afterward, Delilah said to him, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now please, tell me how you can be tied up securely." Samson replied, "If I were tied up with brand new ropes that have never been used, I would be as weak as anyone else." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him up with them. The men were hiding in the inner room as before, and again Delilah cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But again Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread. Then Delilah said, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me, how can you be tied up securely?" Samson replied, "If you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I would become as weak as anyone else." So while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric. Then she tightened it with the loom shuttle. Again she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But Samson woke up, pulled back the loom shuttle, and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. Then Delilah pouted, "How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me?" I'd have been like, wait a minute. First of all, heifer, you's a prostitute. Second of all, why are you trying to find out my secret? You don't never trust secrets with a prostitute. What is wrong with you? Boy, Samson, he playing around too much, right? And this is what gets you in trouble. You will not beat the system, right? Okay. Then Delilah pouted, "How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong." Wait a minute, hold on. Was Delilah a prostitute? I think it was the first woman. I'm sorry. No, it was the first woman. It was the first woman that he slept with at the beginning of the chapter who was a prostitute. I'm sorry. It didn't say Delilah was a prostitute. It got the 2 women mixed up. Greetings. Alicia, Uncle Nathaniel. Okay. Let's scroll down. Finally, Samson shared his secret with her. "My hair has never been cut," he confessed, "for I was dedicated to Yahuwah as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else." Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine rulers. "Come back one more time," she said, "for he has finally told me his secret." And even if she wasn't a prostitute, she was ratchet. Like, he can't trust her. Like, okay, if it had been some kind of like little romantic play, let me tie you up, tell me the secret, and maybe I can overpower you, something like that. Okay. But 3 times you got men busting out the closet. I'm like, first of all, why is other men in here in the closet? And especially, if you didn't immediately go to sleep when you went in the room, right? So first of all, the first time that would have happened, okay, it's possible that maybe, okay, Samson is here, he might freak out, get into the closet. But the second time and then a third time, Samson was not thinking. Listen, Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine rulers. "Come back one more time," she said, "for he has finally told me his secret." So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, And then she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. And then she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, he thought, I would do as before and shake myself free. But he did not realize that Yahuwah had left him. So the Philistines captured him. Bella. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. But before long, his hair began to grow back. Good morning, Uncle. The Philistine rulers held a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, Our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, Our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who killed so many of us is now in our power. Half drunk by now, the people demanded, Bring out Samson so he can amuse us. So he was brought from the prison to amuse them, and they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. Samson said to the young servant who was leading him by the hand, Place my hands against the pillars that hold up the temple. I want to rest against them. Now the temple was completely filled with people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof who were watching as Samson amused them. Then Samson prayed to Yahuwah, O sovereign Lord, remember me again. O Yahuwah, please strengthen me just this one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes. Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple. Pushing against them with both hands, he prayed, Let me die with the Philistines. And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he did during his entire lifetime. Later, his brothers and other relatives went down to get his body. They took him back home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, where his father Manoah was buried. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. All right, y'all. All right, Judges chapter 17. There was a man named Micah who lived in the hill country of Ephraim. One day he said to his mother, I heard you place a curse on the person who stole 1,100 pieces of silver from you. Well, I have the money. I was the one who took it. May Yahuwah bless you for admitting it, his mother replied. He returned the money to her, and she said, I now dedicate these silver coins to Yahuwah. In honor of my son, I will have an image carved and an idol cast. So when he returned the money to his mother, she took 200 silver coins and gave them to a silversmith who made them into an image and an idol. And these were placed in Micah's house. Micah set up a shrine for the idol, and he made a sacred ephod and some household idols. Then he installed one of his sons as his personal priest. In those days, Israel had no king, and all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. More to Levine. One day, a young Levite who had been living in Bethlehem in Judah arrived in that area. He had left Bethlehem in search of another place to live, and as he traveled, he came to the hill country of Ephraim. He happened to stop at Micah's house as he was traveling through. Where are you from? Micah asked. He replied, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm looking for a place to live. Stay here with me, Micah said, and you can be a father and priest to me. I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, plus a change of clothes and your food. The Levite agreed to this, and the young man became like one of Micah's sons. So Micah installed the Levite as his personal priest, and he lived in Micah's house. I know Yahuwah will bless me now, Micah said, because I have a Levite serving as my priest. Let's see. Now, in those days, Israel had no king. And the tribe of Dan was trying to find a place where they could settle, for they had not yet moved into the land assigned to them when the land was divided among the tribes of Israel. So the men of Dan chose from their clans 5 capable warriors from the towns of Zorah and Eshtaol to scout out a land for them to settle in. When these warriors arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, they came to Micah's house and spent the night there. While at Micah's house, they recognized the young Levite's accent, so they went over and asked him, "Who brought you here, and what are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them about his agreement with Micah and that he had been hired as Michael's personal priest. Then they said, "Ask Yahuwah whether or not our journey will be successful." "Go in peace," the priest replied, "for Yahuwah is watching over your journey." So the 5 men went to the town of Laish, where they noticed people living carefree lives like the Sidonians, and they were peaceful and secure. The people were also wealthy because their land was very fertile, and they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. When the men returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their relatives asked them, "What did you find?" The men replied, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it is very good. What are you waiting for? Don't hesitate to go and take possession of it. When you get there, you will find the people living carefree lives. Yahuwah has given us a spacious and fertile land, lacking in nothing." So 600 men from the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zor and Eshtaol. They camped at a place west of Kiriath Jearim in Judah, which is called Mahana Dan to this day. Then they went on from there into the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. The 5 men who had scouted out the land around Laish explained to the others, "These buildings contain a sacred ephod as well as some household idols, a carved image, and a cast idol. What do you think? What do you think you should do?" Then the 5 men turned off the road and went over to Micah's house, where the young Levite lived, and greeted him kindly. As the 600 armed warriors from the tribe of Dan stood at the entrance of the gate, the 5 scouts entered the shrine and removed the carved image, the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the cast idol. Meanwhile, the priest was standing at the gate with the 600 armed warriors. When the priest saw the men carrying all the sacred objects out of Micah's shrine, he said, "What are you doing?" "Be quiet and come with us," they said. "Be a father and priest to all of us. Isn't it better to be a priest for an entire tribe and clan of Israel than for a household of just one man?" The young priest was quite happy to go with them, so he took along the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the carved image. They turned and started on their way again, placing their children, livestock, and possessions in front of them. When the people from the tribe of Dan were quite a distance from Micah's house, the people who lived near Micah came chasing after them. They were shouting as they caught up. The men of Dan turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter? Why have you called these men together and chased after us like this?" "What do you mean? What's the matter?" Micah replied. "You've taken away all the gods I have made and my priests, and I have nothing left." The men of Dan said, "Watch what you say. There are some short-tempered men around here who might get angry and kill you and your family." So the men of Dan continued on their way. When Michael saw that there were too many of them for him to attack, he turned around and went home. Then, with Michael's idols and his priests, the men of Dan came down to the town of Laish, whose people were peaceful and secure. They attacked with swords and burnt the town to the ground. There was none to rescue the people, for they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. This is what happened in the valley of Beth Rehob. Then the people of the tribe of Dan rebuilt the town and lived there. They renamed the town Dan after their ancestor, Israel's son, but it had originally been called Laish. Then they set up carved images, and they appointed Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, as their priest. This family continued as priests for the tribe of Dan until the exile. So Michael's carved image was worshipped by the tribe of Dan as long as the tabernacle of Yahuwah remained at Shiloh. All right, beautiful people. So that was Judges 16, 17, and 18. So let's go ahead and hop on over here to the Legends of the Jews. Where we at? We only at 19 minutes. We got some time today. All right, let's start it. Oh, we got this much of this book left. Okay. Okay, so we stopped in volume 4. Okay, this is chapter 3. No, I'm sorry, chapter 4. We just started chapter 4. That's right, with David. Okay, volume 4, chapter 4. In the subsection, okay, I want to say something. In the subsection, pursued by Saul. Okay, so we know King David is on the scene now, and we had who was that? Somebody was undermining King David by pissing off Saul by praising David. Who was it? What was his name? But anyway, y'all know who I'm talking about. Okay. All right, anyway, let's just pick it up. All right, y'all. Page 412. It's the section pursued by Saul. As Yahuwah stood by David in his duel with Goliath, so he stood by him in many other of his difficulties. Doeg. Thank you, Tiffany. Yes, thank you. Often, when he thought all hope lost, the arm of Yahuwah suddenly succored him, and in unexpected ways, not only bringing relief, but also conveying instruction on Yahuwah's wise and just guidance of the world. David once said to Yahuwah, "The world is entirely beautiful and good, with the one exception of insanity." Ain't that still the truth today? Yes. What does the world derive from a lunatic who runs hither and thither, tears his clothes, and is pursued by a mob of hooting children? Verily, a time will come, said Yahuwah in reply, when thou wilt supplicate me to afflict thee with madness. Now it happened when David, on his flight before Saul, came to Achish, the king of the Philistines, who lived in Gath, that the brothers of Goliath formed the heathen king's bodyguard, and they demanded that their brother's murderer be executed. Achish, though a heathen, was pious, for which reason he is called Abimelech in the Psalms, after the king of Gerar, who was noted for piety. He therefore sought to pacify David's enemies. He called their attention to the fact that Goliath had been the one to challenge the Jews to combat, and it was meet, therefore, that he should be left to bear the consequences. The brothers rejoined in that view. If that view prevailed, then Achish would have to give up his throne to David, for according to the conditions of the combat, the victor was to have dominion over the vanquished and his servants. In his distress, David besought Yahuwah to let him appear a madman in the eyes of Achish and his court. Yahuwah granted his prayer. As the wife and daughter of the Philistine king were both bereft of reason, we can understand his exclamation, "Do I lack madmen, that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence?" Thus it was that David was rescued. Thereupon he composed a psalm beginning with the words, "I will bless the Lord at all times," which includes even the time of lunacy. On another occasion, David expressed his doubt of Yahuwah's wisdom in having formed such apparently useless creatures as spiders are. They do nothing but spin a web that has no value. He was to have striking proof that even if a spider's web may secure an he was to have striking proof that even a spider's web may serve an important purpose. On one occasion, he had taken refuge in a cave, and Saul and his attendants, in pursuit of him, were about to enter and seek him there. But Yahuwah sent a spider to weave its web across the opening, and Saul told his men to desist from fruitless search in the cave, for the spider's web was undeniable proof that no one had passed through its entrance. Similarly, when David became indebted to one of them for his life, he was cured of his scorn for wasps. He had thought them to be good for nothing but to breed maggots. Once David, David once surprised Saul and his attendants while they were fast asleep in their camp, and he resolved to carry off, as proof of his magnanimity, that's how you say it. As proof of his magnanimity, the cruse that stood between the feet of the giant Abner, who like the rest was sleeping. Fortunately, his knees were drawn up so that David could carry out his intention unhindered. But as David was retiring with the cruse, Abner stretched out his feet and pinned David down as with two solid pillars. His life would have been forfeit if a wasp had not stung Abner, who mechanically in his sleep moved his feet and released David. There were still other miracles that happened to David in his flight. Once, when Saul and his men compassed David round about, an angel appeared and summoned him home to repulse the raid of the Philistines upon the land. Saul gave up the pursuit of David, but only after a majority had so decided, for some had been of the opinion that the seizure of David was quite as important as the repulse of the Philistines. Again, in his battle with the Amalekites, David enjoyed direct intervention from above. Lightning and flashes and sheets illuminated the dark night, so enabling him to carry on the struggle. Wars. David's first thought after ascending the throne was to wrest Jerusalem, sacred since the days of Adam, Noah, and Abraham, from the grasp of the heathen. The plan was not easy of execution for various reasons. The Jebusites, the possessors of Jerusalem, were the posterity of the sons of Heth, who had ceded the cave of Machpelah to Abraham only on condition that their descendants should never be forcibly dispossessed of their capital city, Jerusalem. In perpetuation of this agreement between Abraham and the sons of Heth, monuments of brass were erected. And when David approached Jerusalem with hostile intent, the Jebusites pointed to Abraham's promise engraved upon them and still plainly to be read. They maintained that David before could take the city, which they had surrounded with a high wall. He would have to destroy the monuments. Joab devised a plan of getting into Jerusalem. He set up a tall cypress tree near the wall, bent it downward, and standing on David's head, he grasped the very tip of the tree. When the tree rebounded, Joab sat high above the wall and could jump down upon it. Once in the city, he destroyed the monuments and possessed himself of Jerusalem. For David, a miracle had happened. The wall had lowered itself before him so that he could walk into the city without difficulty. David, however, was not desirous of using forcible means. He therefore offered the Jebusites 600 shekels, 50 shekels for each Hebrew tribe. The Jebusites accepted the money, and David gave a bill of sale. Jerusalem had been acquired. David had to prepare for war with the Philistines, which the king gave proof at once of his heroic courage and his unshakable trust in Yahuwah. The latter quality he displayed signally in the battle that took place in the Valley of the Giants. Yahuwah had commanded David not to attack the host of the Philistines until he heard the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees. Yahuwah desired to pass judgment upon the tutelary angels beneath them before surrendering the heathen themselves to the pious, and the motion of the tops of the trees was to indicate that the battle could proceed. The enemy advanced until there was but 4 ells between them, and the Hebrews. The latter were about to throw themselves against the Philistines, but David restrained them, saying, Yahuwah forbade me to attack the Philistines before the tops of the trees began to move. If we transgress Yahuwah's command, we shall certainly die. If we delay, it is probable that we shall be killed by the Philistines, but at least we shall die as pious men that keep Yahuwah's commands. Above all, let us have confidence in Yahuwah. Scarcely had he ended his speech when the tops of the trees rustled, and David made a successful assault upon the Philistines. Whereupon Yahuwah said to the angels who were constantly questioning him as to why he had taken the royal dignity from Saul and given it to David. See the difference between Saul and David? Of David's other campaigns, the most notable is his war with Shobach, the Aramean, whom he conquered in spite of his gigantic size and strength. Shobach was very tall as a dovecote, and one look at him sufficed to strike terror to the heart of the beholder. The Aramean general indulged in the belief that David would treat the Syrians gently on the account of the monument still in existence at that time, which Jacob and Laban had erected on the frontier between Palestine and Aram as a sign of their covenant that neither they nor their descendants should wage war with each other. But David destroyed the monument. Similarly, the Philistines had placed trust in a relic from Isaac, the bridle of a mule which the patriarch had given to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, as a pledge of the covenant between Israel and his people. David took it from them by force. However, David was just as David. Oh, okay. I was reading it wrong. However, David was as just as he was bold. Disregard of the covenants made by the patriarchs was far removed from his thoughts. Indeed, before departing for the wars with Arameans and the Philistines, he had charged the Sanhedrin to investigate carefully the claims of the two nations. The claim of the Philistines were shown to be utterly unfounded. In no sense were they the descendants of the Philistines who had concluded a treaty with Isaac. They had immigrated from Cyprus at a much later date. The Arameans, on the other hand, had forfeited their claims upon considerate treatment because under the Aramean Balaam, and later again in the time of Othniel, under their king Cushan Rishathaim, they had attacked and made war upon the Hebrews. Among David's courtiers and attendants, a prominent place is occupied by his counselor Ahithophel, with whom the king was connected by family ties, Bathsheba being his granddaughter. Ahithophel's wisdom was supernatural, for his counsels always coincided with the oracles rendered by the Urim and the Thummim, and great as was his wisdom, it was equaled by his scholarship. Therefore, David did not hesitate to submit himself to his instruction. Even though Ahithophel was a very young man at the time of his death, not more than 33 years old, the one thing lacking in him was sincere piety, and this it was that proved his undoing in the end, for it induced him to take part in Absalom's rebellion against David. Thus he forfeited even his share in the world to come. To this dire course of action, he was misled by astrologic and other signs, which he interpreted as prophecies of his own kingship, when in reality they pointed to the royal destiny of his granddaughter Bathsheba. Possessed by his erroneous belief, he cunningly urged Absalom to commit an unheard of crime. Thus, Absalom would profit nothing by his rebellion, for though he accomplished his father's ruin, yet he would yet be held to account and condemned to death for his violation of family purity, and the way the throne would be clear. Okay. Thus, Absalom would profit nothing by his erroneous beliefs. I'm sorry, no. Thus, Absalom would profit nothing by his rebellion, for though he accomplished his father's ruin, he would yet be held to account and condemned to death for his violation of family purity, and the way to the throne would be clear for Ahithophel, the great sage in Israel. The relation between David and Ahithophel had been somewhat strained even before Absalom's rebellion. Ahithophel's feelings had been hurt by his being passed over at the time when David, shortly after ascending the throne, invested on a single day no less than 90,000 functionaries with positions. On that day, a remarkable incident occurred. When the ark was to be brought up from Geba to Jerusalem, the priests who attempted to take hold of it were raised up in the air and thrown violently to the ground. In his despair, the king turned for advice to Ahithophel, who retorted mockingly, "Ask thy wise men, whom thou hast but now installed in office." It was only when David uttered a curse on him who knows a remedy. Okay. It was only when David uttered a curse on him who knows a remedy and withholds it from the sufferer that Ahithophel advised that a sacrifice should be offered at every step taken by the priest. Although the measure proved efficacious and no further disaster occurred in connection with the ark, yet Ahithophel's words had been insincere, for he knew the real reason of the misadventure and concealed it from the king instead of following the law of having the ark carried on the shoulders of the priest. David had put it on a wagon and so incurred the wrath of Yahuwah. Ahithophel's hostility toward David showed itself also on the following occasion. When David was digging foundations of the temple, a shard was found at a depth of 1,500 cubits. David was about to lift it when the shard exclaimed, "Thou cannot do it." "Why not?" asked David. "Because I rest upon the abyss." Since when? Since the hour in which the voice of Yahuwah was heard to utter the words from Sinai, "I am the Lord thy God, causing the earth to quake and sink into the abyss. I lie here to cover up the abyss." Nevertheless, David lifted the shard, and the waters of the abyss arose and threatened to flood the earth. Ain't it just like a legend? I'm telling you, the abyss is under here. Don't move it. The abyss. Man, get out of here. Ain't no abyss under there. Let's go lift it up. Nevertheless, David lifted the shard, and the waters of the abyss arose and threatened to flood the earth. Ahithophel was standing by, and he thought to himself, "Now David will meet with his death, and I shall be king." Just then David said, "Whoever knows how to stem the tide of the waters and fails to do it will one day throttle himself." Thereupon Ahithophel had the name of Yahuwah inscribed upon the shard, and the shard thrown into the abyss. The waters at once commenced to subside, but they sank to so great a depth that David feared the earth might lose her moisture. And he began to sing the 15 songs of ascents to bring the waters up again. Oh, that makes sense. And I got to go back and read all the psalms that are labeled the songs of ascents. Oh, okay. Look. All right. The waters at once commenced to subside, but they sank so great a depth that David feared the earth might lose her moisture, and he began to sing the 15 song of ascents to bring the waters up again. Nevertheless, David's curse was realized. Ahithophel ended his days by hanging himself. At last, his last will contained the following 3 rules of conduct: refrain from doing aught against a favorite of fortune, take heed not to rise up against the royal house of David. If the feast of Pentecost falls on a sunny day, then so weep. Posterity has been favored with the knowledge of but a small part of Ahithophel's wisdom, and that little through two widely different sources, through Socrates, how do you say his name? Socrates. Through Socrates. Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. I thought the word was off. Posterity has been favored with the knowledge of but a small part of Ahithophel's wisdom, and that little through two widely different sources, through Socrates, who was his disciple, and through a fortune book written by him. All right, let's move on over here to Joab. Joanne, shalom. Joab, the warrior, was a contrast to Ahithophel in every essential. Shalom, Kathy. He was David's right hand. It was said if Joab had not been there to conduct his wars, David would not have had leisure to devote himself to the study of the Torah. He was the model of a true Hebrew hero, distinguished at the same time for his learning, piety, and goodness. His house stood wide open for all comers, and the campaigns which he undertook redounded invariably to the benefit of the people. They were indebted to him for luxuries, even, and more than that, he took thought for the welfare of the scholars, he himself being the president of the Sanhedrin. It interested Joab to analyze the character of men and their opinions. When he heard King David's words, like as a father pitieth his children, so Yahuwah pitieth them that fear him, he expressed his astonishment that the comparison should be made with the love of a father for a child, and not with the love of a mother. Mother's love as a rule, is considered the stronger and the more self sacrificing. He made up his mind to keep his eyes open and observe whether David's ideal was borne out by facts. On one of his journeys, he happened to be in the house of a poor old man who had 12 children, all of whom the father supported, however meagerly, with the toil of his own hands. Joab proposed that he sell him one of the 12 children. He would thus be relieved of the care of one, and the selling price could be applied to the better support of the rest. The good father rejected the proposition brutally. Then Joab approached the mother, offering her 100 gold denarii for one of the children. At first, she resisted the temptation, but finally she yielded. Come on, sis. When the father returned in the evening, he cut the bread, as was his wont, into 14 pieces for himself, his wife, and his 12 children. And allotting the portions, he missed a child and insisted upon being told its fate. The mother confessed what had happened during his absence. He neither drank nor ate, and the next morning he set out firmly to resolve to return the money to Joab and to slay him if he should refuse to surrender the child. After much parleying, and after the father had threatened him with death, Joab yielded the child to the old man with the exclamation, "Yes, David was right when he compared Yahuwah's love for men to a father's love for his child. This poor fellow, who has 12 children to support, was prepared to fight me to the death for one of them, which the mother who calmly stayed at home had sold to me for a price." Wow. Among all the heroic achievements of Joab, the most remarkable is the taking of the Amalekite capital. For 6 months, the flower of the Hebrew army, 12,000 in number, under the leadership of Joab, had been besieging the capital city of the Amalekites without result. The soldiers made representations to their general that it would be well for them to return home to their wives and children. Joab urged that this not only would earn for them contempt and derision, but it will also invite new danger. The heathen would be encouraged to unite against the Israelites. He proposed that they hurl him into the city by means of a sling and then wait for 40 days. If at the end of this period they saw blood flow from the gates of the fortress, it should be a sign to them that he was still alive. His plan was executed. Joab took with him 1,000 pieces of money and his sword, and he was cast from the sling and fell into the courtyard of a widow whose daughter caught him up. In a little while he regained consciousness, pretended to be an Amalekite taken prisoner by the Israelites and thrown into the city by his captors, who thus wished to inflict death. As he was provided with money, which he dispensed lavishly among his entertainers, he was received kindly and was given the Amalekite garb. So appareled, he ventured after 10 days on a tour of inspection through the city, which he found to be of enormous size. His first errand was to be, his first errand was to an armor bearer. No, not an armor bearer, an armorer, to have him mend his sword, which had been broken by his fall. Like, first of all, you slinging me into a city with 1,000 pieces of silver and a sword. It's just by the grace of the Most Holy that I didn't fall upon my sword while flying into the city. And I was knocked out, unconscious, until this woman came over and helped me up, right? His first errand was to an armorer to have him mend his sword, which had been broken by his fall. When the artisan scanned Joab's weapon, he started back. He had never seen a sword like it. He forged a new one, which snapped in two almost at once when Joab firmly grasped it. So it happened with the second sword and with the third. Finally, he succeeded in fashioning one that was acceptable. Joab asked the smith whom he would like him to slay with a sword, and his reply was, Joab, the general of the Hebrew king. I am he, said Joab. And when the smith in astonishment turned to look at him, Joab ran him through so skillfully that the victim had no realization what was happening, whereupon he hewed down 500 Amalekite warriors whom he met on his way. Not one had escaped to betray him. The rumors arose that Asmodeus, the king of the demons, who was raging among the inhabitants of the city and slaying them in large numbers. The rumor arose that Asmodeus, the king of the demons, was raging among the inhabitants of the city and slaying them in large numbers. And you will hear that name in some movie, Asmodeus, the king of the demons. If you watch enough movies, you'll hear that name quite a few times. After another period of 10 days, which he spent in retirement with his host, Joab sallied forth a second time and caused such bloodshed among the Amalekites that his gory weapon clave to his hand, and his right hand lost all power of independent motion. It could only be made to move. It could be made to move only in a piece with his arm. Okay. It could be made to move only in a piece with his arm. He hastened to his lodging place to apply hot water to his hand and free it from the sword. On his way thither, the woman who had caught him up when he had fell into the city called to him, Thou eatest and drinkest with us, yet thou slayest our warriors. Seeing himself betrayed, he could not but kill the woman. Scarcely had his sword touched her when it was separated from his hand, and his hand could freely move, for the dead woman had been with child, and the blood of the unborn babe loosed the sword. Wow. After Joab had slain thousands, the Israelites without, at the very moment when they were beginning to mourn their general as dead, saw blood issue from the city, and joyfully they cried out with one accord, Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah our God, he is one God. Joab mounted a high tower, and in stentorian tones shouted, Yahuwah will not forsake his people. Inspired with a high and daring courage, the Israelites demanded permission to assault the city and capture it. As Joab turned to descend from the tower, he noticed that 6 verses of a psalm were inscribed on his foot. The first verse running thus: Yahuwah answers thee in the day of trouble. The name of Yahuwah, of the name of the God of Jacob is thy defense. Later, David added 3 verses to complete the psalm. Thereupon the Israelite took the Amalekite capital, destroyed the heathen temples in the city, and slew all its inhabitants, except the king, whom with his crown of pure gold on his head they brought before David. Okay, we had 50 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna read this next section. David's piety and his sin. Actually, I might get to read the next 2 sections. Okay. Oh, Absalom. Okay, look, all right. I just saw something I thought about. Neither his great achievements in war nor his remarkable good fortune moved David from his pious ways, or in aught changed his mode of life. Even after he became king, he sat at the feet of his teachers, Ira the Jerite and Mephibosheth. To the latter, he always submitted his decisions on religious questions to make sure that they were in accordance with law. Whatever leisure time his royal duties afforded him, he spent in study and prayer. He contented himself with, oh, this is good. Look, y'all. I remember reading this the first time. Look. Okay. To the latter, he always submitted his decisions on religious questions to make sure that they were in accordance with the law. Whatever leisure time his royal duties afforded him, he spent in study and prayer. He contented himself with 60 breaths of sleep. At midnight, the strings of his harp, which were made of the gut of a ram sacrificed by Abraham on Mount Moriah, began to vibrate. The sound they emitted awakened David, and he would rise at once to devote himself to the study of the Torah. Besides study, the composition of psalms naturally claimed a goodly portion of his time. Pride filled his heart when he had completed the Psalter, and he exclaimed, O Lord of the world, is there another creature in the universe who, like me, proclaims thy praise? A frog came up to the king and said, Be not so proud. I have composed more psalms than thou, and besides, every psalm my mouth has uttered, I have accompanied with 3,000 parables. And truly, if David indulged in conceit, it was only for a moment. As a rule, he was the exemplar of modesty. The coins which were stamped by him bore a shepherd's crook and a pouch on the obverse, and on the reverse the Tower of David. In other respects, too, his bearing was humble, as though he were still the shepherd and not the king. His great piety invested his prayer with such efficacy. Hold on. I think that's efficiency. Efficacy. Sorry, y'all. His great piety invested his prayer with such efficacy, I think that's what it is, efficacy, that he could bring things in heaven down to earth. It is natural that so godly a king should have used the first respite granted by his wars to carry out his design of erecting a house of worship to Yahuwah. But in the very night in which David conceived the plan of building the temple, Yahuwah said to Nathan the prophet, Hasten to David. I know him to be a man with whom execution follows fast upon the heels of thought, and I should not like him to hire laborers for the temple work, and then, disappointed, complain of me. I furthermore know him to be a man who obligates himself by vows and to do good deeds, and I desire to spare him the embarrassment of having to apply to the Sanhedrin for absolution from his vow. When David heard Nathan's message for him, he began to tremble, and he said, Ah, verily Yahuwah hath found me unworthy to erect his sanctuary. But Yahuwah replied with these words, Nay, The blood shed by thee I consider as sacrificial blood, but I do not care to have thee build a temple, because it would be eternal and indestructible. Nay, the blood shed the blood shed by thee I consider as sacrificial blood, but I do not care to have thee build a temple, because then it would be eternal and indestructible. But that would be excellent, said David, whereupon the reply was vouchsafed him, I foresee that Israel will commit sins. I shall wreak my wrath upon the temple, and Israel will be saved from annihilation. Now, if Israel knew this, they wouldn't be so fast now. Well, they wouldn't be so fast now to try to re-erect the temple. And well, we ain't trying to build no temple, right? For real. We just trying to line ourselves back up with the most holy and have supernatural things happening again for us. While the people who call themselves Israel is trying to build a temple again, right? Listen to this. This is a whole revelation in itself. Look. Nay, the blood shed by thee I consider as sacrificial blood, but I do not care to have thee build a temple, because then it will be eternal and indestructible. But that would be excellent, said David. Whereupon the reply was vouchsafed him, I foresee that Israel will commit sins. I shall wreak my wrath upon the temple, and then Israel will be saved from annihilation. However, thy good intention shall receive their due reward. The temple, though it be built by Solomon, shall be called thine. David's thinking and planning were wholly given to what is good and noble. He is one of the few pious men over whom the evil inclination had no power. By nature, he was not disposed to commit such evil doings as his relation to Bathsheba involved. Yahuwah himself, okay. Yahuwah himself brought him to his crime, that he might say to other sinners, go to David and learn how to repent. Nor indeed may David be charged with gross murder and adultery. There were extenuating circumstances. In those days, it was customary for warriors to give their wives bills of divorce, which were to have validity only if the soldier husband did not return at the end of the campaign. Uriah, having fallen in battle, Bathsheba was a regularly divorced woman. Look, hold on. Uriah, having fallen in battle, Bathsheba was a regularly divorced woman. As for the death of her husband, it cannot be laid entirely at David's door. For Uriah, I didn't need to get that wrong. Okay. As for the death of her husband, it cannot be laid entirely at David's door, for Uriah had incurred the death penalty by his refusal to take his ease at his own house according to the king's bidding. Moreover, from the first, Bathsheba had been destined by Yahuwah for David, but by way of punishment for having lightly promised Uriah the Hittite, a Hebrew woman, to wife, in return for his aid in unfastening the armor of the okay. Look, okay. It connected. Okay, so the story's connected for me. Okay. Moreover, from the first, Bathsheba had been destined by Yahuwah for David, but by way of punishment for having lightly promised Uriah the Hittite, an Israelitish woman, to wife, in return for his aid in unfastening the armor of the prostrate Goliath. The king had to undergo bitter trials before he won her. Furthermore, the Bathsheba episode was a punishment for David's excessive self-consciousness. He had fairly besought Yahuwah to lead him into temptation, that he might give proof to his constancy. It became about thus. He once complained to Yahuwah, O Lord of the world, why do people say, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob? Why not the God of David? The answer came, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were tried by me, but thou hast not yet been proven. David entreated, then examine me, O Lord, and try me. And Yahuwah said, I shall prove thee, and I shall even grant thee what I did not grant the patriarchs. I shall tell thee beforehand that thou wilt fall into temptation through a woman. Once Satan appeared to him in the shape of a bird. David threw a dart at him. Instead of striking Satan, it glanced off and broke the wicker screen in which hid Bathsheba combing her hair. The sight of her aroused passion in the king. David realized his transgression, and for 22 years he was a penitent. Daily he wept a whole hour and ate his bread with ashes, but he had to undergo still heavier penance. For a half year he suffered with leprosy, and even the Sanhedrin, which usually was in close personal attendance upon him, had to leave him. He lived not only in physical, but also spiritual isolation, for the Shekinah departed from him during that time. Okay, y'all. So we'll pause right here because we are at the hour mark, and we'll pick this up with Absalom tomorrow and David's atonement. All right. Oh, we'll probably read that too. Okay. So, but anyway, y'all, I hope y'all enjoyed the reading for today. We read Judges 16, 17, and 18, and we started on the Legends of the Jews, page 412, and we stopped on page 417. Okay. It is March the 16th, 2021, day 103 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets, and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 772. That's without the Sabbath days and the feast days, Sabbath days added into the count. And it's Tuesday morning, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and hop on over here to the Legends of the Jews. I'm not Legends of the Jews, to the blessing. Sorry, y'all. And the blessing is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, May Yahuwah bless us and keep us. And may Yahuwah make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. All right, beautiful people, remember, we are preparing for Passover. Passover is coming up. It is the 27th. Feast of Unleavened Bread starts the very next day, March the 28th. Remember, it is a 7-day feast. Remember, the first day and the last day is a Sabbath, right? And it's actually the actual Sabbath, which is Sunday. Because of the new moon cycle, the Sabbaths are on Sundays now because new moon was spotted on a Sunday. Remember, the new moon is the line leader of the Sabbath. And the new moon is, in all actuality, like a Sabbath day, really, because you feast on that day as well. And as you read, matter of fact, once you're reading throughout the scriptures, and especially, actually, we kind of read, did we read over that part in the Bible? You can see some instances of it, even with King Saul and David, and when they were having feasts. No, we haven't read it. We haven't read that part yet in the Bible, but we're coming upon it. But when they threw a feast and they call out, it was a new moon feast, and that's the part with Jonathan. We haven't got to the part with Jonathan and David yet, but if you kind of pay attention, it kind of calls out things which I was like, wait a minute, so is the new moon like a Sabbath day as well? But come to find out, a lot of times it's treated also like a Sabbath day. It's the line leader of the Sabbath days, but we don't call it out as a Sabbath day because just like this, the last Sabbath of this month, we had it was Friday, but the new moon was Sunday. So if it was in all actuality a true Sabbath day, that would mean you would have two Sabbaths every month. You would have two Sabbaths in the last week of the month, and that's not the case. There's only one Sabbath per every 7 days, right? So technically, the new moon is not a Sabbath day. Some people treat it like a Sabbath day, but if you just had the true Sabbath on Friday, now we got the new moon on Sunday, you resting again. You will just say, we call it out. We recognize this is the beginning of the month. Beginning of the month, yay, people throw a feast or whatever. If you can rest, rest. You can rest if you want to, if you can, right? But just so you know, because I've seen some people actually teaching that it is, in fact, a true Sabbath day. I'm not going to say they're right. I'm not going to say that they're wrong. But based on what I understand at this point, we don't have to. Well, hold on before I say that, because I just thought about something. Look. No. Look. Now I'm thinking about it, because I was about to say, wait a minute. When the feast days fall up, because I say it all the time, when you got it lined up correctly, the longer feast, the first and the last day actually falls on a real Sabbath anyway. So there's one Sabbath a week, y'all, and the way it lines up is perfect, right? So yeah, so I wouldn't, like I said, as of right now, I would not teach that the new moon day is a Sabbath day. I don't believe at this point, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe it's an actual Sabbath day like the regular Sabbath, but it's a new moon day where you can hold feast, and it falls in the same week of the Sabbath, on the last week of the month, to let you know that the new month is rolling in. But anywho, so remember, we're removing all the leaven products, the yeast byproducts. Check the labels really good. If you can remove it all, you know. But if you're living with someone and they're going to completely freak out and they're not kind of really keeping you who's lost, then do what you can do, right? Okay. So let's use a little wisdom when the feasts come up. It ain't got to be overly, oh, you're going to, it ain't really supposed to be all like that. Like some people just need to kind of grow in grace and loosen up a little bit and learn how to use wisdom in keeping the commands. And if you prepare ahead of time, you will continue moving without a glitch, all right? You won't throw the family off, especially if only you out of the household is keeping it, right? So you just got to use wisdom and watch and pay attention. And if you're a wise woman or a wise husband who does all the stuff, cooks and prepares the meals and everything, it's kind of in your control to do all this. Learn how to substitute different seasonings and different things during this period of time, you know, unless you're a spouse or whatever. They just, look, I'm eating bread, whatever. Okay. All right. We ain't gonna argue. We ain't gonna split the house for this, you know. We are kind of still in captivity. So we're practicing this memorial feast. Not saying that you shouldn't, because if you can, you should absolutely keep it. I'm just saying just kind of have some grace and tolerance for the other people who are not completely on board yet, that don't understand, right? Because you can win more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, right? Choose some wisdom. All right. That's it, y'all. Got to get out of here. I ain't got nothing else, and I don't think there's any questions. Let's check real quick. All right, y'all. That's it. Out of here. I see y'all in the morning, bright and early, 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ooh.